Yay. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to wait for some others to come on. Hello, Chamonix. Wow, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. This is awesome. I see so many names that I recognize, and it makes me so happy.
Oh my gosh.
This is a song written by Ulithian Vibes.
Hi, Nicole. Long time no see.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Nicole. It's John. How are you? Yes, I'm driving. I don't know if you can hear me very well.
I can hear you.
Oh, good.
All right, maybe let's go ahead and get started then. Okay, welcome everybody. We are so excited. We really wanted to kick off this with a talk about traditional canoes and navigation and canoe building and canoe steering as part of this larger metaphor for voyaging from place A to place B, and how voyaging takes an entire community. It takes somebody who can build the canoe, and then the person who builds it can't be the only one that knows how it's built, because then the people who are steering it won't understand how it works. It takes people to help find where you're going. It takes people to help do the sails. It takes an entire community. And so that's the metaphor of the voyaging canoe. I think Larry's going to talk a lot more about that and the stories around that metaphor. And we feel at our work at One People One Reef, we do our best, certainly, to embody that, to include as many voices as we can in the work that we do, and most importantly, to listen to voices about what needs are in different communities, so that we can help pull together people, resources to support what those needs are. So in our organization, we do a lot of science work with reef management and conservation, which is not a word we often use. We really prefer to use words like management. And then we also do youth work, because of course the youth are the future of everything. So that's sort of the metaphor. And Magul, I'm going to pass it to you. We are so honored to have Larry here today. So Magul, I'm going to let you introduce Larry.
Sorry, thank you. I don't want to take away too much from the time, because we have such a rich, I think, conversation, community meeting today. I think we're so honored to have Larry be our first speaker. He's a co-navigator, leader in his own right, and I think that instead of doing this a traditional way, I won't talk too much about details like that. I hope that after the end of this, you will feel who Larry is and what the essence of this, the importance of canoe and the collaboration that we're doing today. So without further ado, Larry, thank you very much for the honor to have you today.
John Jr., and thank you, Nicole. Surawami, perhaps maybe before I start the presentation, to at least recognize and pay some tribute and respect to ancestors, to those who came before us, those who are going to come after us. I note, of course, presence of some of my good friends who are here. But let me do a traditional, what we call a volleyball first. And volleyball, if you, for those of you who know, it is basically allowing us to share things, share knowledge that don't belong really to us, belong to those that are coming and passed on from those that were. So our responsibility is to ensure that we can pass that on. This is Weriyeng that I will do before I proceed. And it goes something like this. Hey, Valpuliwe, and ito ko buhay, Valpuliwe, and ito ko buhay. If I rangai, Masanoy, Tumani, Otong Rifai, if I Masogru, if I Mita, let them Masai. Eu also fai, eu Lolbis, or Palinoy, and La River on Palifree. Eu also fai, Ida Masanoi. Yamabri of Weiratul, Yamamot on a Pelmanupon. I followed with this chant that we call it Sumatao chant, which is there's at least 5 or 6 of it verses to it, but I'll just do the very quick 2 shorts, the 2 first ones. Sumatao is to open up an ocean. Voyagers, when we leave our islands to go on a voyage, we often do a Sumatao after paying also respect to great navigators. We do a Sumatao depending on what school of navigation you come from. Uh, for us, at least for me, Weriyeng from Pulot, we do our Sumatao as we exit the channel of Pulot. Panur do theirs inside. And so goes something like this. I have my conch shell here that I will. Emadonige oro. Emadonigo mare. Eya sugi. Eya busiki. Medawana. Eigo. Eya. Medawi. Medawani. Kayalanga. Medamanga. Medawani. Getchu nga. Medawani. Kamor nga. Sa medamin na guferin bay. Liga bay do. Le diwani may. Le sure. Ewasu gamu. Rechangani mana. Imani su metawe. Ewasu epoa. Ewasu sula. Epoa wala. Mewa nifani nito. Thank you. I actually went for the third verse of it, but I want to do a very brief introduction and then maybe a Carolinian story, Central Carolines. And here I want to emphasize that we're really, the stories that I will share with you are basically stories that are true from perhaps from in those days from as far east as Morlocks, Juke area, and all the way down to the outer islands, from the Namunwito group, Pafang Namunwito, down to the Patiu and over to the west outer islands of Yap. These people, as you know, pretty much share the culture, and linguistically they can also communicate from that far east as the Morlocks all the way down to as far west as the southwest islands of Palau. We are the people that are identified as some call us the Refalwar. I think that's commonly known out here in the Marianas Archipelago. We are also identified as the reimethau group, or the reimethau people from the ocean, and Refarapi from those smaller tiny atolls. I will share. There are plenty versions of these stories of navigation, but at least for our presentation today, I'll perhaps maybe share the most common ones that we've kind of come to know in recent times that relates to how navigation has been passed on. I think you could probably find some on YouTube referring to the origin of navigation being brought to our islands from the east, and how it was transferred from maybe the bird, the Uling down, or to others from these certain deities that have the knowledge. You will find that in navigation, there are some common deities, gods, spirits that are part of these stories. Palulap being one of them, Maluluay being the other. But they varied in their task and in what they represent. And then third, I want to talk about the navigation system as I understand it from the Central Caroline. Again, an emphasis on the area where we're kind of honing in on the maybe even smaller now, where the practice of canoe culture is still pretty much prominent, that being the western islands of Chuk, the Patiu area, to an extent the Namunuito, and down to our islands of outer islands of Yap, Sadawat, Lamatrek, Ifiluk, Uliai. And the navigational system that encompasses a whole lot of things, a lot of tasks, a lot of responsibilities, and a lot of understanding. So it's a much more complex system than just being able to navigate by the stars per se. I also note, of course, and I'm actually grateful because I have a dear friend of mine from university time. I noticed the presence of John Haskins here. Some decades ago, I was in the Bay Area studying in San Francisco. And while I was trying to fit in, I might share the story because while I was trying to fit into the West and, getting my feet wet and understanding the concept of classroom and learning at the university level, I was always reminded of home and work, hard work and labor through one individual who was always running around campus trying to collect all the cans to recycle, collect all the plastics, and that was John Haskins. I was like, oh, either this guy should go back to Micronesia, or because he likes to work his hands and his feet, or he's maybe flipped and gone haywire. But I know, John, today you've made a big difference in many lives and in mine. So I'm grateful that you're here. So maybe as a background, giving you some understanding for those of you who don't know, I know that most of you are familiar with this map of where exactly are we looking at. Here you would see the Federated States of Micronesia map, comprising of these 4 different states, Kosrae being the farthest east, Ponape, Chuuk, and here's Yap. But in between Yap and Chuuk are all these dots that make up the central, as the Carolines, right? Or at least the group that we're talking about, the reimethau, the Refanapi. People from the Halls, people from Pulap and Pulusuk and Puluat, Namunuit of Magur, Onon, and all the way down to Ngulu and even Southwest Palau, down all the way down here. So this is our group. But for Federated States of Micronesia, for again information purpose, some demographic here, contains about 607 volcanic atolls. You can imagine the size of the area encompassing over 1 million square miles of the Pacific Ocean, with 7,192 square kilometers of lagoon only. So that's a pretty large area. As of, I believe, 2010 or so, we had about population, has a population of 102,000, or 103,000. 49% of that is from Chuuk, 32 from Ponape. And for us in Yap, we comprise about 8%, or 11% actually. Kosrae also being the smallest with 8. Now, taking you down even to my small, tiny island of Lamatrek, here it is. I know, Nicole, you've been there, and John, you've been there, and others. But this is Lamatrek. This is where I grew up. 14 years, first 14 years of my life was spent on the sandbar, running around and playing, and life basically made up of fishing every day in this lagoon, and just life was as simple as it could be. The island is nearly half square mile, 7 feet above sea level, and I believe we've gone a little bit over 28 households, but the last count I know, there were about 28 households on the island with 350 people. So you could imagine that, what life would be like on this tiny island where everybody knows everybody, and your business is everybody's business. The structural hierarchy of it, much like everywhere else, we have our chiefs, we have our community, we have our clans, we have our family, and then we have self. I want to stress here that most of these islands, we often see ourselves as being at the bottom of the totem, if you like, that you kind of like grow up in these societies knowing that your role as an individual is catered toward the higher family, the clan and community, the chiefs, even to the spirits, the island. And so from day one of life, we've been taught that there is life is bigger than just yourself. You need to work with the community. You need to understand the meager resources that are available to you. and know how to be able to survive on small islands such as ours. So we move on to the two stories that I want to share. One story that I know as the origin of navigation as we know today is the story of Kuling. And Kuling was a golden plover bird who was also a man-eating spirit. Some say he lived in Pohnpei, some say he lived in Cachao. Now, Cachao refers to some ancestral name of some place sacred where the origin of navigation came from. So we just kind of put in Pohnpei, but I believe Cachao for me and for those who've taught me, refer to some place with higher mountains, refer to some place where the heaven and the earth meet. It's where you see all the clouds coming below the top tip of the hills. Us being from low-lying flat atolls, I'd imagine being so fascinated seeing an island with a mountain and believing that there the gods from Palulap and Eluluay would very likely being able to go in between the worlds. It should also be shared that I think for the purpose of our storytelling, in the reimethau storytelling, there's always some reference to 5 different worlds that we have. We have the world that is from the south. We have the world that is from the north. We have the world, of course, that we all live in. And then the heavens is the other world. And then the 5th one being the underworld, down under the bottom of the sea. And, these are sort of like where all the settings of these different worlds that allows spirits to move about in between them, and to some extent, certain supernatural beings or people like Lu'gailan, who is one of our deities, has a way of going from this place that we're in over to Cachao, over to the world down under the ocean. But this Kuling, this bird came, he was eating all the people down to Chuk, to Onon. But one small island of the Patio area known as Pulap, it was said that Palulap was there, and Palulap was able to apply his magic to hide Pulap. So when the bird flies over to eat up the people from Pulap, he couldn't find it, and he lands on Hoke, Pulsuk. Several times after eating up all the people on Hoke, he was attempting to go to Pulap, he wouldn't find it. But Palulap was able to play his magic and eventually fix a basket of food to his daughter Inasafa, who was going to be the mediator. Some people also call her Gafas, but Inasafa was the daughter of Palulap, who was given the basket and go out on the beach of Pulap. I believe it's called Moran Ulpi. And there he was able to, or she was able to call the bird over and present the food. The bird looked at the food and said, "I've been eating all the human beings. I won't be satisfied with this little taro that you brought." But the daughter convinced the bird to eat. And every time the bird eat from the basket, it refilled itself, to the point where the bird just kept eating and eating. And finally, he was very satisfied. And being satisfied from that food, he decided that he was going to pass on the knowledge of navigation. And so the first learner of navigation was the daughter of Palulap, who then took the skills from the bird. But before the bird left, she said, you have to allow me to get more food for you. So Nasafu made more basket, put on the guling, and allowed the bird to fly off. Unfortunately, the bird never really went that far and fell down somewhere near Maguf on the islands in the Namonwito groups. And there we believe is where the guling fell and died in that ocean. And so that's one way of our islands, one story that was referred to us as how our navigation passed on. The second story that I'm told, which I'm more related to, is that of Weriyeng and Fanur. These are 2 brothers, Weriyeng being the younger brother and Fanur being the older brother. They lived in Purwat. Their mother whose name is Ilawol. It was the sister of Palulap himself. And Palulap has his own kids, those being Rongjik and Ronglap, who were also Palulap's kids and cousin to Weriyeng and Fanur. Long story short, the mother will transform herself to a guel or to a lizard and swam across the ocean, across the deepest part of this planet, being the Marianas Trench, found her islands, well, came up to the Marianas Archipelago and cooled her bellies in a pond here before going off to her island of Guel. Today, we still think that the island is there, but in the Weriyeng and Fanur are the two brothers who then learned it from their uncle Palilap, and were able to spread the navigations all across the islands. Weriyeng was the younger brother, Fanur is the older one, but as usual for brothers, there would always be some competitions, and through their lives, they've always been managed to compete. I think the Fanur ended up trying to kill his younger brother, but wasn't successful. And in return, Weriyeng was able to bit off the finger of Fanur when he jumped out of the Oolong Bowl during a ceremony that we call Atari when a voyage is done. And so Weriyeng became the higher mast. But again, Weriyeng and Fanur are the two remaining schools of navigations, as I know, that are still in existence for us here in the Central Carolines. Now I want to share with you what I've been trying to emphasize in terms of this Carolinian navigational system, as I'm told. I think it could be easy for us today to misrepresent our canoe culture and our navigational system, to think that it's all about sailing under the stars, finding an island. But really, it's more than that. And it's more complex, like any all other skills and sets of skills. Canoe culture requires at least, it is said, 10 different individuals. And here we're going to be talking maybe metaphorically and symbolically in a way. So if you envision looking down from the top of a canoe, you would see the outrigger extending out to be, that's the tam as we call it, and then A being the waliwa or the hull, and C becomes, this one becomes the pip. And here we have 3 individuals on the tam, 3 individuals on the hull, and 4 individuals out on the pip. Nicole mentioned the equivalence of something, a canoe structure, and as it relates to community structure. And yes, for us, this is how we're looking, this is our canoe culture. That in order for this canoe to move, in order for this canoe to sail, in order for an island community to survive, you ought to at least have these core skills of these 10 individuals. So here on the outrigger on, as we call it, wetam, you would have these 3 people sit there. And those being the taubang, who is the engineer person, who is the self-defense, he's the master in all of that skills. Taoyan would be the wise man, and the senap being the master carver. So these 3 individuals, their place on this canoe is on the outrigger. On the opposite of the outrigger, you have 4 individuals. These are the spiritual individuals, which includes the leader, their tamul. You have Tautafe, who is the herbal medicine individual. Tauja, who will massage, fix all the broken bones. Taoyalus is a spirit man. And then finally, on the main hull of this canoe, you have the Tauman or the weatherman. Tauboy, who does the definition and predicts the future. And finally, Palilap himself. So he sits here. What that means is that while it would be ideal to have this 10 individual on a canoe, any given time a canoe is going to move. What it means is that as a navigator, as a seafarer, as a person who comes from these islands and voyage, it is imperative of you to have all sets of 10 in one person, so that you can be, for as we know, perhaps maybe at the pinnacle might be the navigator, but where would the navigator go if he has no canoe? Thus, it's required of the navigator to know to build his canoe. And where would the navigator and the canoe builder go if they don't know how to build their canoe house to shelter their canoe? Thus, it's required of the taubang and the tauyan to do that. And where would they go if they don't know how to predict and understand the weather patterns? Hence the tauman. And if anybody should get sick, what do? They need herbal medicine. Man. So you can see that this is the essence of our canoe culture, is to be able to acquire these sets of skills. And so for us, we understand that being on a canoe is a dangerous thing. To voyage is sometimes requiring you to say your final goodbyes and understand that when you go out on the ocean, your best friend out in the ocean is also death, and it travels with you on this canoe. And so lifetime learning is for you to know all of those, because those are what's going to save you out there. Likewise, on an island, you need to have all these skills and leadership. You must understand the environment of which you depend on heavily. You must know how to plant the trees. You must know how to harvest them. So ours is from the ocean to the land, all the way up to understanding the universe or the skies. That would be the whole. And then finally, I just want to share a few things about what I'm doing. As Waa'gey was an organization I co-founded in Yap some years ago. Waa'gey, by the way, as some of you might have heard me say, Waa'gey comes from, it's an actual Ulithean, it's an outer island word, but I think still being used in Ulithean Fais, the word Waa'gey. And as John would explain to you, Waa'gey is often used for future. The word is future. So it might be said that it's on its deathbed because the younger generations are not able to use that more frequently. But more interestingly, if you say the word Waa'gey in Yap, it means complete chaos. So I've always liked to use that analogy of like, well, if you lose your culture, maybe you can expect a complete chaos. And Waa'gey, what we do is try to work on canoes, work on other women's weaving and stuff. This was a canoe that we had built, and in Yap, we worked on two. This one is this Queen Veronica, as you can see, this individual standing. This is a pretty big and large sailing canoe. This was a canoe used, sailed out here in Guam for FSPAC. We also work with the youth to transfer skills. Here, they're learning how to build fish traps for sustainable fishing method, indigenous fishing method to conserve resources. I call it our version of fish icebox, where we can just harvest what we need and leave the rest in this trap for rainy days, or the smaller ones would be able to escape out of there. And I believe, I mean, for the time being, we are now, because of pandemic, we stopped working down at the canoe houses in Yap, which have been removed because Yap has other plans on expanding the area. And then I found myself being stuck and stranded out here in Guam. So continuation of my work to promote culture is now being carried out here at the university level. I'm now working at UOG and teaching courses in a certificate program for Micronesian seafaring that I put together and piloting it for the first time now. Hopefully we'll have the first cohort finished after a year. So there is a lot of exciting things happening for us, but I think for seafaring and for navigation, I've always wanted to stress the importance of having to understand that it's not just us being able to navigate by the star. We need to understand a lot of stuff. We need to know that this navigation system encompasses a lot more than that, and navigation by the star. So I'm happy to be with you today, and I think that because of time constraints, I much prefer that we have interactive sessions where we can ask each other questions, and if I have answers, or Fidelino or Mogul has answers, they can chime in, and we'll have a fun time talking about traditional seafaring. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. That was awesome.